Texting and mobile phones are good examples of what we call disruptive technologies. A disruptive technology is any innovation that appears suddenly and makes the old ways of doing things more or less obsolete or outdated.
The word disruptive makes it sound like a bad thing.
Well, that's the usual reaction of people who are accustomed to doing things the old way. Over time, however, new inventions that were once disruptive usually become the norm, and eventually people can't imagine living without them.
Could you give an example?
The transition from horses to cars is a good example. Think of what life was like a century ago when horses were the main form of transportation in cities. How many people's livelihood depended on the horse? There were people who took care of horses, made equipment for horses, drove horse-drawn carriages, and so on and so forth. I'm sure that many of those industries protested when cars started replacing horses. Yet in just a few years, horses had— no, what I meant to say was, in just a few decades, horses had been completely replaced by automobiles. But society ultimately adapted to the change, and I think no one today would want to go back to the days before cars existed.
And you say that cell phones and the internet are a kind of disruptive technology?
Definitely. Let's consider some of the objections that many people, and mostly older people, I might add, have to texting, or even emails to a certain extent. One complaint that you often hear is that children are no longer being taught good handwriting in schools. It is certainly true that some young people today only know how to print in block letters rather than write in the way that was commonly taught 20 or more years ago. But the fact is that people today rarely write anything by hand anyway, so there's a counterargument. Why should elementary school teachers spend countless hours teaching children proper handwriting? What's the point of that if children don't need it?
But surely something has been lost, some part of our heritage. That's a tragedy of sorts, isn't it?
Personally, I think there are skills humans shouldn't lose. But speaking from a historical or sociological perspective, the world keeps changing whether we like it or not. This is particularly true of communication technology.
How so?
Just look at how people reacted to new types of communication technology throughout history. Even the oldest of inventions, writing, had its critics.
Really? I find it hard to believe that people were worried about writing.
Of course, we don't know exactly how ancient people felt when writing was first invented, but I can give you a famous example. The Greek philosopher Socrates was very suspicious of writing, and he himself never wrote down any of his ideas, although fortunately for us, his students did. Socrates said that when people wrote their ideas down, their memories and ability to think became weaker. He thought that writing made people less wise. We don't know if Socrates really said that, of course, or if his was an isolated opinion or one that was widely held. But this story illustrates an important point, which is that people are often suspicious of new forms of communication because they believe they are worse in some way and might have a negative influence on society.